Welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. And today I'm here with Dave Rouse, who's a very good friend of mine. We've known each other for a number of years now. First met through EO, I believe, but we've known each other for a while before that. Welcome. So Dave is the CEO of CarbonClick, and according to the website, they connect businesses and individuals to projects that fight climate change. So Dave, would you mind explaining a bit more about what that really means?
Yeah, and I apologise for my croaky voice today.
Too much partying, eh?
I've been yelling at the kids all day yesterday, trying to teach them sailing. CarbonClick is about helping to power up a business or an individual's sustainability goals through offsetting what they can't reduce. And what that means is, you know, you've got a carbon footprint. We've all got a carbon footprint, and we've got this massive problem in the world that our carbon footprint far exceeds the planet's capability to deal with it, and it's spiraling out of control. Mm-hmm. Climate change is one of many negative impacts from that. So we all need to reduce our carbon footprint. Yep. But there's only so much technology and only so many options at the moment that allow us to move quick enough. But what we can do is we can offset the balance. Mm-hmm. And that's where CarbonClick steps in, is for individuals, you can offset the carbon footprint of your life. And for businesses, they can either offset their products or the residual footprint of their products so that they're carbon neutral or carbon offset. And for businesses wanting to offer this to their customers, they can also implement an option where the customer can click to offset while they're purchasing something. Yep. The classic example everybody knows is with the airlines. You go and book your flight, or you might remember booking your flight.
It seems like such a long time ago now.
Yeah, I know. We're all desperate to explore the world again and reconnect with friends overseas. It's a tough time. But when you do get that opportunity again to book your flights, you'll notice the carbon offset button or tick box on a lot of airlines.
Yeah. And if I'm right, because I mean, that was where you originally headed, right? Remember when we were going through the incubator, that was what the whole business model was. And of course, you were really only just starting to take off and COVID hit. So how was 2020 for you, and what did that mean for your business?
Yeah, 2020 was just as rough for us as it was for many. We were looking for the noose and trying to figure out, whether there was a way through this at all. Yep. What we tried was the next part of our business plan, which we'd always anticipated scaling into the wider e-commerce space. So we'd gone from having our airlines and airports that we had already signed up, who cancelled those contracts. Yeah. We'd gone from that to setting up the business to trade e-commerce. So when you're buying your handbag online or whatever it is that you're buying, or your pair of Allbirds, you can immediately just click a button or click a tick box to offset the emissions of that product. Or even if you don't know the emissions of that product, you know that we've got a problem that's big, and it gives you an opportunity to do something about it. And the big thing that CarbonClick has changed is the trust and transparency of carbon offsetting. So in the past, especially with airlines, people had lost a lot of trust that money actually went to a good place. So does it actually result in trees being planted or protected? Yep. Does it actually result in positive change for the climate? And they just don't trust the airlines or any business enough to know that it's just not another money-making scheme or helping them to comply. Yep. So
tick box.
Yeah, or a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
So what we do is we actually provide a track and trace receipt, just like a track and trace on a courier, which shows you exactly where it might be $2 has gone. Yep. Right down to the carbon certificates on the government registries, like the Emissions Trading Scheme registry for New Zealand.
Yep. That's come a long way since I saw it in the incubator. That's awesome. So I understand so it started off as a pretty, let's say, shit year, turned itself around. You've had a good year coming out of that. Obviously, e-commerce has been booming. You've got about 15 staff now, is that right? Or 15 locally? Or
yeah, we've got 12 in New Zealand and 3 overseas.
Yep. Awesome.
And a lot of that is research and development still, because we need to, like with any tech startup, we need to continually stay well ahead of the curve as we're scaling.
Yeah. Fair enough. Now, I know that you're really passionate about sustainability, but that's not your only business, right? So you've got other businesses that you currently own. And am I right in saying you've had 12 businesses over the last 20 years?
Yeah, that's right. Most of them I have, maybe for 3 years or so, enough to get in there, learn an industry and conquer a challenge.
Yep.
And then exit again and be able to take a bit of time out. But some of them have been longer periods. Some of them have been much shorter periods.
Sure. So what's your proudest moment throughout all that?
Throughout all that probably was in business, a 25-year-old company that we bought, a bricks and mortar engineering business, New Zealand based. And that was a bit of a management buyout where I was called in as an external party.
Mm-hmm.
I'd done some auditing and background work for that company in the past, just to help them out. And so I was a little bit familiar with the back end processes behind it. So we were able to get in and restructure that business for triple bottom line profitability.
So explain that. I mean, I understand a little bit of what it means, but for the people who are listening in, what do you mean by triple?
Yeah, so what we look for with triple bottom line profitability is they've got to be sustainable financially.
Yep.
They've got to be sustainable from a social perspective.
Yep.
And together known as socio-economic responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is environmental sustainability. So is it a circular economy business, or are you having a net deficit effect on the planet? And if you are, what are you doing to make up the balance? Because, our kids and their kids will run out of land and landfills at some point in time. These are issues we have to address. So when I look at a business, I look at the opportunities for that business to turn it into a more sustainable business all around.
Yep.
I wouldn't do it if I couldn't get better social outcomes, environmental outcomes, and financial outcomes. All three have to tick the box.
Fantastic. Okay, and I know on a personal level, this sustainability is a big passion of yours, and you were involved in SeaCleaners. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Yeah.
So this was coming out of my passion for the environment. I grew up out in the bush.
I saw that.
We didn't have Glad wrap on our sandwiches or anything like that. In fact, we're lucky if we had shoes to go to school with.
And you walked 10 miles in the snow.
It was none of that. It was just our parents couldn't force us to wear them.
Okay.
We just preferred bare feet. We're just, we loved it. And then we moved closer to town, and I started to see, less sustainable ways. And if we had rubbish in the bush, we didn't have a regular rubbish collection. We had to take it somewhere and deal with it. So you were very cognizant of making sure that you didn't create much rubbish because it was another hassle. Here, it's just so easy because it doesn't matter. You don't think about it. Everything just goes into a bin and disappears. And because it disappears out of sight, out of mind, you don't know that it's a problem.
Yeah.
But SeaCleaners was one of those opportunities to educate on single-use plastics. It also came from my love of diving and fishing and spending time on the water. Mm-hmm. And in New Zealand, increasingly, I was seeing, as I'm swimming, I'm seeing plastic things floating past me, and straws and simple things. Yeah. Plastic bags were terrible. And I was reading stories from Kelly Tarleton's and other marine biologists about the number of turtles that were dwindling in population. And generally speaking, it's because they're eating plastic bags, because jellyfish is a big part of their diet.
Yep.
So SeaCleaners was really founded to educate and try and be the ambulance at the top of the cliff, but having impact by being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. So we took groups of corporates and school kids out to islands or coastlines around New Zealand to begin with, to actually do the cleanup. So we used the wind and the tides as our net. At high tide, all the plastics gets deposited.
Yep.
And then when the sea breeze comes in the late afternoons and the tide changes, that carries back across the harbour again. So you're able to predict where the rubbish buildups will be. You can collect it before it passes back through the harbour again.
Yep.
It's quite an efficient way of doing it. And And that education really sinks in when you're giving the talks, and then people are actually seeing, we've seen Kiwi skeletons with party balloons in their ingested. So they've obviously thought that balloon just looks like a worm or something. I don't know what the Kiwi thinks, but all we do know is that all of those plastics that we just take for granted have an impact sometime downstream, and that was the idea, is to prevent more of that impact. And we quickly got good corporate sponsorship and local government sponsorship to expand. In fact, right now SeaCleaners is doing all of the America's Cup.
I actually saw a truck out on Sunday. I was out walking the dogs, and it reminded me of you. But you're not involved in that anymore now, are you?
No, I had to pull back in the middle of last year because mainly because CarbonClick had grown so much faster, and with COVID happening, there was so much change going on that I just needed to be fully committed with all hands on deck with CarbonClick. We're talking 80-hour weeks for probably 9 months. I just didn't have the bandwidth to carry on with it, and it broke my heart having to, leave it after building, with others, building it up to such a good position. But we've got to pick our battles right.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all hands to deck when COVID hit, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, so I wanted to ask you, so you've had these varying businesses, and your sort of modus operandi is to go in there and look about how you can, make the business more profitable while still maintaining sustainability and the other important things. A lot of people think that introducing sustainability comes with a cost, and therefore it's going to erode your profits. Can you tell me how you approach these businesses and what you do to focus them and what effect that has?
Yeah, I mean, it does come at a cost, but that cost is like any cost of improving a business. If you want a new machine that operates twice as fast and uses half the fuel, it's going to cost you money. It's all an investment. And those investments might pay off, or they might be for the right reason. For me, it was a non-negotiable that we have to be a sustainable operator, and that's about standards more than investments. But in saying that, more often than not, if you take a big picture approach, all of the sustainability efforts that we've put into a business have resulted in helping to make that business, give it a social license to operate, give it a better exit opportunity, because you're ticking a lot more boxes for investors, and investors these days and directors, they want to see sustainability as an important part of their portfolio too. And the financial returns normally come from over time improving your brand image. And if you've got a better brand image, that might be what gets you a client over your competitor who just doesn't care about this or is not far enough on the journey yet. So from my perspective, I could have potentially made a little bit more money if I'd not cared about it, but I certainly made plenty by doing the right thing.
Sure. And I mean, you've taken a lot of businesses that have been very reliant on the business owner and then worked with that to remove that reliance on the business owner. First of all, why is that important? And secondly, what does that do to the business in terms of value at the end of the day?
Yeah, so I mean, probably the majority of businesses in New Zealand, at least, and globally, have been founded by a good idea and a great person, and they've brought another partner or another team, or maybe it's a husband and wife, to build this business. And that business is their nest egg, it's their retirement plan, it's everything. They never ever anticipate selling that business. Then something happens, or they have a heart attack or something, they realize
life's too short.
Life's short, and they've built more like a jail around them, and they can't get out, because every system and process, because they're so clever, usually they're able to plug holes much easier than training somebody else or fixing a process, which takes far longer. Or building a process.
I can relate, but that's okay.
But it's so much easier just to plug the hole yourself and keep going. And eventually you run out of fingers and toes and think, crikey, we're still growing and there's more holes appearing. And because there's more holes appearing, all I'm going to do is take my finger out of that hole and put it into this hole, and you start to lose scalability and hit your glass ceiling. And a lot of businesses that I've looked at, that I've wanted to purchase have been in that situation where they've plateaued on growth
Yep.
And plateaued on profitability because of the business owner. So then the business owner decides one day they want to sell. Or maybe they have a marriage breakup and they have to sell or something. Mm-hmm. Circumstances change. That's one thing we know for sure.
Yep.
And because there's been no planning for an exit and the business is not ever going to be exit ready in their current business model, they have to sell the business for market value, which is significantly lower than what it could be worth if they'd just got those systems and processes sorted out so that the business didn't rely on them as a business owner.
Yeah.
And often I've gone into businesses where they've gone into a lost territory without the business owner because they've had an epiphany or, found love and just gone overseas and let the business come crashing down, or for whatever reason they've had to duck out of the business or decided to. And that business is now making a loss and potentially worth next to nothing. Perfectly good business. And before that time, they've spent years building this thing up, and they've wasted all of that energy for very little returns. Business owners usually earn very, very little.
Almost minimum wage.
Yeah, minimum wage if you're lucky sometimes.
Yep.
I know I've been there. Mm-hmm. And so all of that effort, you don't want it to be for nothing. You want to try and have your business ready to be able to capitalize at any point in time that you need to.
Mm-hmm. So that's all about letting go, isn't it? You're about hitting the ceiling, and really the only way to get past that hitting the ceiling, and it happens to us all at different levels, individual, departmental, organizational. The only way you can really move past that and keep growing as opposed to just completely plateauing or worse still failing is to actually learn how to let go. How do you do that? Because it's tough, right?
It's a really hard one. It's like, letting your baby go or whatever. Parents can probably relate. When you're leaving a baby with a babysitter or sending them away on holiday or whatever.
Yep.
It's just something that you have to do. You have to be able to separate yourself from the business. You are not the business. If you are the business, it's not a business, it's a job, right?
So what would be the kind of the steps that you would talk to people about taking in terms of, making sure the business isn't built around them?
Generally speaking, you need to be able to prove resilience through making sure that I would test it on a small scale first.
Yep.
Reduce your hours to 4-day work week and all those kind of things, and see how the business fares, see where the cracks are. But it's really getting external eyes on the business as far as systems and processes, which is really important.
Yep.
So having an independent director, having a good mentor to be able to map out systems and processes, and down to a detailed level, depending on the size of the business. For larger businesses, for example, we'd put in place in the manufacturing business, 25-year-old engineering company.
Yep.
We ran our heads of engineering through lean manufacturing courses so that they could learn the end-to-end processes, learn where they were creating waste, learn where they could improve profitability and turnaround of everything that they were doing, instead of a business owner having to come and point out on the same things on a daily kind of basis. So depending how big you are, getting those systems and processes mapped out and an independent person to help you with that is probably the first and most important step I would take. And then empowering your staff to actually recognize continuous improvement cycles around that, and incentivizing your staff to do so.
I was going to say, we were chatting about this before we actually came on the podcast. You said that often businesses don't incentivize around the end goal. And so that you might be incentivized for productivity, where in actual fact, the business is looking for something different than that. So can you give me an example of how you're incentivized to get best results?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in businesses where they've had, they've produced something or had a service and they've sold something. So they got sales teams and they've got teams that do the work.
Yep.
Those teams that do the work don't have any incentive against their pay for producing more.
Yep.
So they've got nothing to strive for. They've got no ongoing training to help them achieve higher targets. You really want them to be able to better themselves as a result of working for you. Then they're not just a machine. They've got to advance.
Yep.
And it's easy to get that in place. It's same with sales people. I've been in organizations where there's no commission or financial reward in their pay that directly attributes to better quality sales and better sales volumes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just making sure that all of those, the KPIs are all aligned to the business goals for the right people. And often there's a team KPI component as well missing, where if the business does better, everybody does, has a bonus attached to that. So I've generally gone in with a package approach.
Yep. Because they've all got to be on the same page first of all, don't they? If a company doesn't, if everybody in the company doesn't know what is going on and where we're headed, how do they work towards getting there? So I suppose.
Yeah, the arrows have all got to be pointing in the same direction.
Yep.
And from the employment contracts right through to the staff motivational talks, through to the sharing the business strategy at an annual at least basis.
Yep.
And working down to management teams, depending on size of the business, to make sure that their teams are also empowered in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way to get them to listen is to get them to teach.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah.
And that seems to have worked really well from my experience.
Fantastic. Okay. So if we gave the listeners 3 points they could walk away with here today in terms of what they can start to do at least to get on that journey of your triple bottom line and profitability, what would that be?
Yeah. So the most important thing there is team alignment.
Yep.
By far and large, making sure all those arrows are pointing in the right direction. So have a good HR person review and potentially help you to restructure. If people are set in their ways, you might have to cut the umbilical cord.
Tony talked about that a few weeks ago. Yeah, sometimes you've got to let those people go.
Yeah. It's the best thing for them, a fresh start,
mm-hmm.
and the best thing for your business to bring some fresh life in.
Yeah.
Change.
So all on the same page, right people, right seats.
Yeah.
Incentivizing to achieve the results. Yep.
That's right. So sorting out that team alignment, number one, in incentivization. Number two would be bringing an independent view.
Yep.
So
why do you say that? Because you mentioned that earlier. Why isn't it independent?
Because we all have a rose-tainted view of our own theories.
Yes.
So
when you Google something, right? You look for the answers that you want to read, not the ones.
Only going to pay attention really
yeah.
to the data that supports our theory, because we always want to be right. That's a human nature.
Yes.
Whether we're proving it to ourselves or anybody else,
yeah.
To the detriment of the business. So what you need is somebody independently to see, you need to be taking independent surveys and that sort of thing, which is the third thing I'll talk about. But
yep.
you need somebody independent that can look at the data, look at your market validation, and see whether that makes sense against your strategy and focus.
Sure.
So that would be the second thing: independent director or business mentor that can help you see the data for what it is.
Yeah, I like that idea, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is having the voice of the customer.
Yep.
So you need to make sure that you're listening, because that's where opportunities come from: improvement opportunities, new opportunities, and so that can be as simple as net promoter scores, or it can be as complex as customer interviews.
Yep.
But you want to make sure that you really understand why your customers are buying from you, what your customers want from you, and whether there's a gap in expectations that leaves you exposed to a competitor coming in and doing a better job.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I suppose finally, just in terms of sustainability, what would be the one sort of key tip around building a sustainable business? What are the things that you've learnt in your 12 businesses?
Yeah, so from a sustainability perspective, again, getting a quick and dirty, I call it, independent audit from a sustainability consultant. It can cost very little and give you a few ideas which you can prioritize where your biggest opportunities to improve are, and start with those. But there are lots of eliminating wastage is probably the best results I've had out of all businesses. Cutting back that wastage, automating systems and processes so that your lights aren't on where they don't need to be.
Yep.
If I use that as an analogy for all processes in the business.
Yep. Place to start. Fantastic. Hey, look, Always a pleasure to have you on here. If people are interested in CarbonClick and think it might be for their business, how would they get in contact with you?
You can just inquire. There's a chat on the website, carbonclick.com. You can connect with any of our team on LinkedIn. Just look up CarbonClick. We're all there, so you can go straight to the right person. Similarly, on the website, we're all first name basis at carbonclick.com.
Excellent.
We have a policy of not employing two people with the same name.
Okay, no more Daves then, right? Got it.
No.
Hey, Dave. Look, as always, I love chatting to you. I could talk for hours, but we don't have hours, unfortunately. But I appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Bye.